Hello and welcome to today's episode where we are joined by the lovely Amy Day. We're chatting about her journey starting up a new business, a business that's been born out of a place that many parents can relate to. We talked about her trademarking journey, juggling work and business. Probably most importantly, we talked about vulnerability and how important it is to actually ask for help. So let's get on with the episode. Hi, I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Dan, and welcome to our podcast,
where we talk to real people about real problems in real situations.
Grab a cuppa while we talk founder life.
Welcome, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, do you want to start off just by sharing who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Amy, and I am in my 40s, early 40s, and predominantly I am a stay-at-home mum. So I have 4 girls who I'm really proud of, and I've been mainly based at home for the last 8 years. But recently, over the last few months and years of planning, I have been planning to set up my own business.
That's exciting.
It's very exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah.
It is. And it's going to be every mother's dream, I am sure. Do you want to share a little bit about the business?
Absolutely. So if I just go a little bit back. So when my youngest daughter was about 1, she got the chicken pox. And I remember kind of getting all of the girls together, going off to our local supermarket, utter chaos, standing in the middle of the aisle and staring at the shelves and knowing, because I've done this a few times before, what I needed to grab in that moment, but just not being able to see it. And I think any of us who've kind of stood in the middle of a supermarket needing anything in a hurry, you just can't see what you're looking for. So while all of this chaos is kind of going on around me, I thought I just need to grab the stuff I need and go. I just need to grab and go kit. And it was almost like time just stood still for a millisecond. And I thought, that's a really good idea. And then it kind of just went away and I got the things I needed and I carted all of the girls out of there and went home. And when I got home and I was a little bit more settled, I thought, that was a really good idea. Imagine if I could have just gone into the supermarket and I could have just picked up off the shelf a kit of the things that I needed. I would have been in and out so easy. And I actually had, I know lots of people say this, but I had like a little Starbucks napkin next to me. And I was just sitting there kind of doodling and thinking about, was this like a feasible idea? Is this something I could actually do? Could you make first aid kits for kids that instead of just having things, if you had a cut or a graze or a burn, it would actually just be tailored to a specific illness? And I thought, this is gold. And was super excited and was, we all do telling our families, and everyone was like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. And then I woke up the next day and thought, but this hasn't been done before. And there's probably a lot of really smart people in the world who potentially could have thought of this. So maybe if it hasn't been done, it's because it can't be done. So I let it go quiet for a little while, but I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So I decided I was going to really try and research into it. So I started right at the very beginning. So it's not the easiest market to try and work within medicines or pharmaceuticals. It's really heavily legislated. There's lots of do's and don'ts. So I started reading about what my rights were to sell medicines. I think when I very first thought of the idea, I thought, wow, I can just go to a wholesaler, I can get a white label Calpol, and I'll just have my own range of medicines, and this is going to be amazing. That is just not obviously an option. But I was able to kind of navigate around what I was able to do and perhaps come to a point that is the best of both worlds, and something I truly believe in, which is mixing general pharmaceuticals with conventional and homeopathic alternatives, because I think there's a place for both. And I think that I use both within my home, and most of my friends do as well. So that was kind of the beginning of the business idea. but it's definitely taken quite a while to get to a point where we might be able to actually sell those products.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, no business idea is an easy overnight thing, is it? But even more so with regulations you've had.
Right.
And you've also done, is it patenting? You've got patents or something as well, the legal side?
I don't have any business acumen. So part of the reason this has taken quite a long time is that I needed to tick all of the boxes and make sure that I wasn't going to start a company or start an idea, put this out into the world and potentially lose it at the first hurdle, because there's obviously so many huge companies that could probably quite easily take this and run with it themselves. So I thought the easiest way for me to be able to cover myself would be to trademark my business. Yes, and my business idea. So I actually reached out to a lawyer, and this is something that you and I are really passionate about, CHERYL, because I've belonged to a women's group for many years and they have been invaluable. So the point that I started at, where this truly was a side hustle and I was financing it myself, I needed to reach out to as many people as I could who were specialists in their field, who could give me advice for free, because I did not have the funds to start going to approach people professionally. So I was really lucky that I spoke to a lawyer at the Albright, and she said she would be really happy to sit with me and explain the process of trademarking. And when she gave me the fee schedule through her London-based legal firm, and she also very kindly showed me the signpost for how I could do it myself, I chose to do it myself and saved myself thousands in the process. So I did trademark the business and the boxes. So I trademarked my business name, which is Snot Bother. And I also trademarked 2 potential products underneath that and what they'll be classed as. So when you go through the trademarking process, you have to have a 3 to 5 year business plan, predominantly not just for what you want to initially start off with, but maybe what you want to develop your business into. So I decided under classes to look at medicines, but also medical products. I considered, would I ever want to potentially make children's pajamas if they were poorly in hospital? So I just went through all of the different classes and trademarked my branding for that. It was actually quite a simple, straightforward process. And what I've actually found is that if you reach out to a lot of these government establishments, people are really happy to help. And there's a lot of clear advice if you just go and ask the right questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And obviously you mentioned you've had like help and the women supporting you. Is there anyone or any people in particular other than that lawyer that has supported you and helped you on that journey?
I think that I've been really lucky that I'm surrounded by a very strong group of core women in lots of different fields. So, for instance, you are one of them. As my accountant,
that's what I wasn't getting to, by the way.
But you definitely are, because so many things that you just don't understand. So, for instance, when I knew that I wanted to register the company, which I ridiculously decided in January 2020, it's now or never, I need to register this company. You think, great, how do I do that? Again, it was something I was able to do myself with help, but there's a lot of implications with that. So from like an accountancy finance point of view, you've definitely been a great help with that. From a medical point of view, in my background in medicine, my best friend is a GP. She's also a mum, but she was able to kind of sit with me and doubly explain to me what I would need to include, what I couldn't say. So she was a great help from that point of view. And also just looking at lots of female business owners, even if they're not in the same field as me, but they might be a few steps ahead, and just trying to surround myself by those women. Because what I found is, even though there's been so much positive feedback, in fact, not one single person that I've ever spoken to about this idea has ever said, this won't work. everybody has said, oh, wow, yeah, I would buy one of those, or, oh, that's a great idea. I think if you are a parent or even ever cared for a child who's poorly, you know the anxiety that kind of hits you when your child is ill and that sense of urgency. So everybody's been really positive, but there's a real difference between people who nod along and say, yeah, that's a great idea, and people who actually are there to help you step forward and take that idea ahead. It's difficult sometimes.
Yeah, but a big part of all of that is what's come through what you said is not being afraid to ask for help, isn't it? If you need it, because I think a lot of people won't ask for help.
Mm-hmm. I think that I am a people person. You know, I think one of the really positive traits that I've got, I would like to think that I can reach out. I'll speak to anybody. I am the person that speaks to people on the tube. You know, I am that person. You don't want to be a stranger sitting next to me on the tube, because I'll see you reading the book and I'll say, oh, I've read that. And they probably think, oh, no. But, you know, it's one of my greatest strengths. I will reach out to anybody, you know, even, I don't know if you've heard of the company Beauty Pie, but the founder of Beauty Pie is a woman called Marcia Kilgore. She's an amazing entrepreneur. And when I was originally setting up my business, I was going to call it my sit kit. So I was thinking to myself, these are going to be little sit kits and it's going to be called my sit kit. And I was really stuck on that idea. And all of my original illustrations all have little labels on that say my sit kit. When it came time to actually trademark the company, I needed to check and make sure there was no similar companies anywhere. And although trademarking is territorial, so if there was somebody in another country who was holding that name, you could still use it here. If there was any way that the company grew to such an advantage that you would be able to go into other countries, it would then come into effect. So ideally, you want to make sure that nobody's kind of got the same branding or brand name as you. And somebody in America did. So again, I kind of reached out to my lawyer, and she said, you know, even though this isn't a huge problem, if you do want to stay in the UK, it is quite a similar idea. I think that you should leave well alone. So I actually had a whole list of names. And again, it's those kind of situations that I found quite daunting and quite debilitating at times, because when you're starting a business, as you know, you take one step forward, you answer a question, and that question opens up 10 other questions.
Oh, yes.
You're consistently learning lots of different things. So I was kind of sitting down thinking, what am I going to call this business? And at the time I was thinking like petty prescription, like little prescription. And I was already a Beauty Pie user. So I decided in my infinite wisdom, as I quite often do, that I was going to DM Marcia and ask her what she thought of my company name. And she came straight back. And again, she's this huge, amazing entrepreneur. And she came straight back and she said, they won't be able to say it. And I was like, oh, really? And then I actually said to her, oh, what about Snot Bother? Like, while she was online, I was like, right, what about Snot Bother? And she said, oh, interesting, like a double negative. I'm not sure, but it could work. And I thought, no, I really want to use this name. But again, like you say, reaching out to people, you'd be really surprised at who is really happy to give you feedback.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I think that's something we don't do enough of either. I mean, we generally reach out and ask for help to certain people that we kind of know and we think will help us. But yeah, reaching out to somebody like that, good for you. I wouldn't. I don't have the guts to do that sort of thing, but maybe that's where we're going wrong. Maybe we should do that.
Right, absolutely. You should reach out to anybody. I think people, especially when they have really made it, they don't have anything to gain from you personally, but they just want to help somebody else succeed.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, that's it. Who's on my list? Who I'd love to speak to. Might reach out to somebody.
Staying quiet on the right list. Leave me alone. It is powerful, isn't it? The ability to be able to ask for help, I think, is powerful. Yeah. Ask opinions, because People don't do it enough.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's really helped you mould what it is you're trying to achieve. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
You said about the trademark process and said it was relatively simple.
Mm-hmm.
But give us an idea of, might have been simple, but kind of time frame and how that process evolves.
It actually didn't take too long from start to finish. So it's all an online process, and the IPO is actually in Wales, the greatest place in the world. So it's all dealt with online. They have online help assistants who were really happy to help me and very accessible. When you submit your application, it is up for review. But for me, from the moment that I actually put it forward to getting it back, was only just over a month and a half. It wasn't very long at all. I think part of that is I had done my due diligence. So I had looked ahead. I'd looked to see if there was any other businesses in that area. I'd cross-checked. So I think because I'd done my homework, it wasn't like I was opening. I'm just trying to think. There's often quite a lot of businesses that have very similar names. So, for instance, if I'm driving down the road and I might see, lots of garden centres with the same name, or nurseries, like little cherubs here, little cherubs there. So I think because it was quite distinctive, that was quite helpful for me. And the great thing is that the trademarks last for 10 years. You can renew them indefinitely, but 10 years is a great length of time. So it's not something you have to obviously do annually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives you peace of mind for...
It does, especially because I think it's taken me much longer than I would have anticipated to get to this point. So just knowing that those things were in place was, really helpful. But also when I was setting up the trademarking, I also made sure as well that I had all of the potential emails and all of my web domain names at the same time. So a lot of that early planning that I put in place was to make sure that I bought and owned my .com, .co.uk, .net. I made sure that I had them all for a period of years and the email addresses to go with it, because I'd heard some horror stories about people who had set up their businesses, hadn't got their Insta handles or hadn't got their websites, and then had to try and rebuy them, because I didn't realize you never own your domain. You're always kind of paying for it through the host. And then they'll charge you ridiculous amounts. So I think when I bought my website, it was something like £20 a year or £50 for 3 years. Whereas if somebody else had potentially been holding that and I'd waited for it to come up for renewal, it could have cost me a lot more. So that's a really good tip.
Yeah, there was that big thing, wasn't there, with B&Q? Because their website's not B&Q, is it? It's DIY.
Right.
And
right.
Somebody bought it and held B&Q to ransom for it, didn't they?
Absolutely. And I think it would be a nightmare if you had built up your following and your brand to such a point that you needed that website and you couldn't get it. Like you say, they're holding you to ransom.
Exactly. It's not like you have to buy the domain and then go and build the website immediately. As long as you hold the domain, it doesn't matter what you do with it, does it? So it's not... I think a lot of people put it off because they think, well, I'm not ready to build the website yet, so I don't need the domain. But yeah, you've done it the way I would do it as well. Perfect. I just want to know you've got it.
It's not massively costly as well, is it?
Exactly. It's not.
No, it's not. In the whole scheme of things, I think that, of course, all of those costs do add up, but it's a small investment which could potentially, navigate having a big problem at the end.
Definitely. And obviously you've mentioned about the boxes and your designs and everything. So how did the designs all come about? Is it something you've hand drawn yourself, or is it?
So
Designer.
I originally did hand draw the boxes myself. So again, just kind of on the little A4 sheet of paper, just sat there doodling out what I wanted the boxes to look like. And then I decided, as I have with every kind of aspect, I need to go and get a specialist to help me with this. I'm quite proud of the fact that I've utilized a lot of women in my journey so far. So I specifically, no offense, Dan, did go and try and find a local female graphic designer. And I did. I found a brilliant girl, Amy Willow. She's a graphic designer in Barnston. And she came to the house and I showed her what I'd drawn, and she was able to take that and make this amazing set of illustrations for me that I was then able to take to a wholesaler, a manufacturer in Poland. And I had 3,000 bespoke boxes made, which was quite the jump from 0 to 3,000. But I was trying to think of the long game. I was trying to think of the long game. And in terms of costs, it was much cheaper to get a bigger volume. They were obviously bespoke for us specifically. And in terms of the product itself, the branding and the box is key to my business. It's a box that is illustrated internally and externally. So it's really important to me that it was right and it was correct and that it stood out. I didn't want to skimp on the boxes because a lot of the products in the box in the beginning are accessible. Like I said in the beginning, nobody can make their own medicine. So anybody would be able to go out and get a portion of the things that I'll be putting into this kit. So it's really important that the box is also, it's just a huge part of that.
It comes down,
I think you've done it right there.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry,
I was just going to say, and also that's anyone who likes watching Dragon's Den or anything like that, that is quite a common thing they say, isn't it? They'll hold up I don't know, like that, like a package and go, I'm not going to notice that. I'm going to walk past it. Or I'm going to this or I'm going to that. So the fact you've really thought about, well, what this looks like on a shelf and will people look at it, it's important, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, again, like you were saying, there's so many different facets to building a business from scratch. And one whole part of that is thinking about where you want to sit in a market, how much you want to charge for a product, who your market audience is. Now, I was really lucky. I am my target customer. I am a mom, a busy mom. I'm in the right kind of age bracket. I'm probably in the right kind of financial bracket to buy and want to buy my product. So that was really handy for me. But as you rightly say, you could go into Tesco's. We'll use Tesco as a great analogy. So you could go into Tesco and decide you're going to buy or make a lasagna. Now, your first option is probably to walk around and get all of the ingredients yourself. You could go and get a Tesco value lasagna, or you could go and get your top of the range, maybe Charlie Bingham's lasagna, and pay a massive premium for that. And it is going to be delicious, but probably not that much difference. But that overall branding is key and sets what potentially might be a really similar product miles apart. And I wanted to make sure that my product was marketed in the right way and that I could charge the right price for something fairly, that it was going to be worth what I wanted to charge it for.
But it's also, I guess, and this is again no disrespect to dads, but when you send somebody else in to get something on your behalf, how often do they come back with everything you want exactly as you wanted it?
Right, absolutely.
So just go in and saying, "Oh, can you go and get that kit for me?" You know you're going to get everything you need and want.
I'll
absolutely, and you are Yeah. No.
No, but to be fair, that goes the same if I sent my 13-year-old into the shop and said, "Can you go and get XYZ for me?" He'd just be like, I don't know what you mean. I don't know. And he'd be freaking out about it. So it's something that you can just send somebody in and grab it off the shelf. And you know, especially when you've got a sick child at home, the last thing you want to be doing is, as you just said, dragging all the kids out and going and getting it. So
absolutely. I can exactly hear what you're saying. I think it's very interesting though, because Dan, you would be a huge component to this, because as Cheryl was saying, if you are sent out to go and find some cough and cold mixture or, some hay fever medication, for you just to be able to walk in, maybe when it is, because these things always happen in the middle of the night. It's never like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's always the witching hour. You're going out, you don't know what you're looking for. It's hell. Whereas if somebody could say to you, if your wife could say to you, just go and get this kit, you'd be like, on it. You just go in and you see. And actually, I've been really naughty because I've been into a lot of big retailers, a lot of big supermarkets, and I go in and I take a picture of the shelf. And then I get my box out and then I put my box on the shelf and then I take another picture and it looks amazing. It completely stands out. And I know it would be really easy to grab it and go. I know that it would make it easy for people to find. It would be very accessible.
Yeah. I think there's more to it.
I think that's brilliant. That's great marketing.
I haven't. I've actually got this whole camera roll of stilled pictures of dreadful supermarket shelves with half the products missing or what looks like a jumble sale, and then my box just placed on the shelf, and they look amazing. I'm just waiting to see, can I legitimately post that? I probably can. I mean, on my long-term vision board, the greatest thing for me would be to be able to have these boxes on a supermarket shelf. That would be the absolute dream. So yeah, at least I've got it there bookmarked just in case.
Just a quick shout out to our sponsors at Xero, who are, I believe, the best accounting software out there for small business owners. Xero take your security really seriously, and with 2-factor authentication you can rest easy knowing that your data is secure and safe. Check out Xero today at xero.com. That's Xero with an X, Xero.com.
I think there's more to it.
I love it.
Though, isn't there? There's the fact of we're in a society now where people will pay for convenience. People will pay for being able to do and go about their lives as easily as they possibly can, and happy to pay a premium for it. I mean, you can go to, we keep saying Tesco's, I can go to Tesco's if I run out of deodorant or something, and I can buy a thing of deodorant for £1.50, but I don't. I have it on subscription delivered for £5 a month, which is ridiculously more, but it's convenient, isn't it? So people will pay more for absolute convenience.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been looking at this ourselves. We're driving to France in the summer, and there's all these things you've got to have in the car. And we could easily go to Halfords or go on Amazon and buy each thing individually. But if you go onto Amazon and you type in French driving kit, look,
in our driving kit box, because we've just bought the same.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the same, isn't it? It's just like you can go and get all the stuff, but the convenience, you want it there.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And again, I had that exact conversation with a hugely influential entrepreneur, and what she actually said to me was she loved the concept, but she said, you're going to have to put something in here that is bespoke to you, because nobody is going to buy this box when they could collate these things by themselves individually. And I did think for a moment, and coming back to my analogy about the lasagna, I could go into Tesco or Sainsbury's and buy all the ingredients and make it myself. But sometimes, like you're saying, convenience, want, need, a never-ending to-do list means I'm grabbing the lasagna. And I think that's what we do.
Yeah, and also you're bound to forget one of the things, aren't you? How many times do you go into Tesco's to buy We carry on with the lasagna, but how many times you go in to get all the ingredients and then you forget one thing and then you've got to go back again? So at least you know with the kits, you can't, your boxes, you're not going to forget something. I absolutely love it.
Right. I think best example of kits, I think, in supermarkets that works is for heater kits.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can quite easily go and buy it all for probably £3 less, but you don't. You still go and go, the box.
100%. Even if you don't use like the salsa sauce yourself and you stick it in the drawer, 100% you're continually buying the kit. I mean, as my plan for the brand, my dream for the brand would be that I could have my own branded products. Is something that I've talked to manufacturers about, and it is definitely something I would love to do. If I could afford to financially do that and start with my own products filled in the box, I would. But it's definitely part of the wider plan. I think up until then, it's just about really knowing this illness, knowing what works, knowing what doesn't, and just pulling in different elements from lots of different places, just to make sure that people do have a great array of things that they are going to use and things that aren't going to go to waste.
That's an interesting thing. So when you started talking about this, you said about making your own medicines and stuff is an absolute no-go. But if I just like picked an example or something like, however you want to pronounce it, echinacea or whatever, however you want to pronounce it. Can you make something like that?
So
or is there lots of regulations about that?
Right.
Even though it's
so herbal products, you are allowed to manufacture within certain conditions. So obviously in these instances, you would always be using registered, distributors, and you would go to chemists from the offset. It's not something you kind of, well, I don't know, people probably are knocking them up in kitchens, but certainly if you go into Holland and Barrett, you'll notice that there is a real vast array of homeopathic and alternative medications. Now, lots of them actually have lots of side effects or contraindications, and people think because they're herbal, they're safe or they're not as effective. And both of those things are false. They can be very effective, and they also can have real contraindications, but it certainly is easier within that market. So for instance, looking at echinacea and different alternatives, we know that for something like chicken pox, you could use calamine lotion, you could use oats, you can use different salts, and all of those things are natural remedies that you definitely would be able to combine to make a product that you could then sell without it being a medicine, and it would still have really great effects.
See, I still think the best thing for chickenpox is oats, and what I do if Layla ever has, well, when we thought Layla had it and whatever else, is I put oats into a balloon, poked holes in the balloon, and then put it over the tap of a bath and run a bath, so they had an oat bath.
Right.
That'd be so much better if someone could make that much easier.
Absolutely. So lots of people would use a pair of old tights. Like people will just grab anything in their house to be able to use to do exactly what you're saying. So if I had my own factory right now, I'd make oatmeal bath bombs that you could just pop in the bath. You pop the child in the bath because water's so soothing anyway. So they've immediately calmed down. They're going to watch the little bath bomb fizz around, and it's going to soothe their skin at the same time. That would be amazing. In the interim, our boxes will have tiny little Hessian bags with little drawstring handles that you can fill up with the oats, hang them on the bath tap, and then it'll just diffuse through. But you're right, though, sometimes those real home remedies are the best.
No. The main reason of me saying these things, so they are the things that you could brand yourself and have as your... Yes. That's exciting.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think there's a place for everything. So any parent worth their salt knows that children know the difference between own label paracetamol and Calpol. Calpol is the master of them all. My kids could always tell the difference, and it's a household staple. And I think even though there's been lots of news recently about fevers, so I think when we were growing up, if you had a fever, the first thing your parents would do is try and reduce that fever. They'd try and bring it down. You know, fevers were seen as being a really bad thing. And in recent times, it's been much more widely known that fevers are a great thing. It's your body's way of actually dealing with the illness, of trying to fight it itself. And lots of parents will let a fever run its course as long as it's kind of within the right healthy limits. And you don't have to always give paracetamol, ibuprofen. You know, you can, as we say, use more gentle approaches sometimes.
I like it. So what's the? Sorry, I've got one. I've got one last question that's burning. So is the long term? I know you've mentioned supermarket shelves, but is there a plan to subscribe them or something like that, like a regular subscription? Because there's bound to be an everyday sort of one that people use on a regular basis.
That's a really interesting point. And again, kind of going back to an understanding of basic business, the greatest businesses that we have want repeat customers. And generally, you know, we know statistically that most young children get 8 to 12 colds a year. Anyone who's had a small child knows those winter months, sometimes they are back to back. You cannot get a break. So they would be quite good repeat customers. If you have something like chicken pox, you're generally going to get that once. And by the time a child is 8, they're going to have had chicken pox or been exposed to it in some way. So even though you could definitely develop the brand, and we've had lots of different ideas about different kind of kits that we could do, it would be quite difficult to have a regular subscription per se. But what would be amazing, and I think what this is built on, is convenience. So you could give kits as baby shower gifts. That would be really good just to know that you've got them in the house, or you need them ASAP. So ideally for me, if they were on a huge platform such as Amazon that offered next day delivery, or they were on a supermarket shelf, that's what I would need. Because if I woke up today and my child had chicken pox, I don't have 3 days to wait for something to come via Royal Mail. I need it now. And I think if people can't get hold of it quickly, they will seek an alternative. So it's really important to try and think about those delivery options and how you can really quickly get your product to your customer.
Yeah.
Cool. Go on, Cheryl, I interrupted you. Go.
No, I was just going to say, obviously you mentioned at the beginning that you was new to business and everything, and I've got 2 questions actually.
Okay.
So first of all, around the kids, so obviously you're a mum to 4 girls.
Yeah.
So how do you find balancing work and being a mum?
That's a really good question. So I actually started off on a really unconventional route. So I never do anything following the norm. I left school at 16. I didn't sit my A-level straight away. I wanted to work, and I left school on the Friday, and by the following week, I'd got my apprenticeship in Lum Poly, and I was so happy. I was on this really basic wage, but I loved going to work and I loved earning my own money. I had my first daughter when I was relatively young. So when I made a decision that I was going to go to university, she was already 3. I actually started my degree, but ended up dropping out because I found it so difficult to undertake what was a really large degree at that time. I was studying medicine. It was very full on, and raising her single-handedly at the same time. So it took a step back. But again, I went straight into work, and that was where my love of the NHS and healthcare really began. And I worked in the NHS for a long time, over a decade. I loved working. I worked part-time and I felt it fitted in really well with my family. When I had my last child, which was 8 years ago, I was in a really fortunate position that I didn't have to go back to work and I remained at home. And I loved that period of my life. I really wouldn't change it. I loved being at home with her, and she was really lucky that I was able to do that. The minute she went back to school, or she started school, I knew I needed to go back to work. And as a parent, and especially the parent who takes the main responsibility in looking after the children, I couldn't go and I just didn't think it was feasible for me to go and get a 9 to 5 or what then turns into an 8 to 6 Monday to Friday job. I thought I just can't balance all of this. And I think that was part of my reason for not giving up on this business idea, is when I'm sitting here and my greatest driver is financial independence and also having my own dreams and my own goals to aspire to. I think the only way that I can do that is to work for myself, to work around my family. If I was to look for a job right now with 5 weeks until the summer holidays, what would I do with my children in that time? Of course, there are holiday schemes. Some people are really lucky. They have grandparents close by, or, they have other members of the family that would look after the children. I'm not that fortunate. And so also I want to be at home when the children are off from school. I want to be able to enjoy that time with them. So trying to balance it is a never-ending juggle. I don't know how full-time parents do it, because it's really difficult. And although I know it can be done, I think there's a guilt factor on either side of the spectrum. So I think having my own business, if I could have my ideal work-life balance, I think I would work 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday, have nice long weekends, and have as much of a holiday time at home with the children as I can. That would be perfection.
Yeah, I think that's a dream for a lot of parents.
Absolutely. And again, it's privilege, isn't it? Not everybody can not work. Not everybody is able to kind of dictate the hours that they work for so many different reasons. But I think if we're talking about the dream and the dream kind of balance, that would be mine for sure.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of having your own business, isn't it? You get to set within reason. I know there are things that are outside of your control, but within reason, you get to set your schedule. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about, especially women parents setting up their own businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, I think post-COVID, one of the only advantages that's come from that is the ability to hybrid work. And I think it's easier now than ever. Everyone fighting for flexible working, extended childcare. I think all of that we've got so much further to go, but it's kind of never been easier to have more flexible working. But unless you're the person who's making the rules, you're always going to have somebody who's going to tell you when you need to be in the office. And the other problem is, I don't think we ever know when to switch off work. So I know when I was working in the hospital, I could access my emails at home. I would still be checking in if I had 5 minutes, and we don't often switch off. So being able to actually say my workload is done for the day, I think is quite powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
You said
the other question I had.
Go on.
Dan.
No, I can ask mine after. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say the other question I had was, so you mentioned you're new to business and everything. So what would you say was your biggest learning curve that you had to go through?
That's a really good question. Genuinely, I think the biggest learning curve that I've had to overcome is my own self-belief, because I think that there, as I've said, are so many educational programs. There's so much free content. There's so many podcasts, books you can loan, webinars. All of the information is out there. And don't get me wrong, I still don't really know my way around a profit and loss sheet. I still don't know about corporation tax. I'm still trying to work out about customs taxes and all of those kinds of things. But as long as you have an inherent self-belief that you can work towards it and that you will be able to understand it at some point, I think you're halfway there. And for me, that's definitely been my biggest hurdle. So although I can sometimes be my biggest champion, it's actually much easier sometimes to be working for somebody else and not have all of the responsibility and all of the pressure on you. That's definitely been the trickiest.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that one. I think that's been my hardest one as well. And I think it's the same for many people, but probably many of us, or many people, don't want to admit that because it's a sign of weakness. But I actually think it's a sign of strength admitting it.
I think that for me, when I turned 40 and all of these different life events were happening and I didn't have a child at home anymore, and I knew that it was time to go back to work, I really just thought this next chapter of my life could be tremendous. It could be so exciting. Where will I be in 5 years? I could be somewhere completely different. I could have achieved so much more. I'm not over the hill, just halfway through. So, you know, you have to just keep pushing yourself. And I genuinely think anybody can learn anything. I don't have, as I said, any business knowledge. I've had a really varied work life. I've worked in lots of different sectors. But I think if you have an idea and you have belief that you can overcome it, or you can overcome your fears and that you can push through, I think you can achieve anything.
Yeah. Definitely. 100% behind you there.
I think self-belief is a big one for everyone, as you say. But many people just won't admit that they go through those things. But vulnerability sometimes can be our biggest strength, can't it? The ability to say, I don't know, or I need help, or vulnerability can really help us push forwards.
I think that we're really easy just to put ourselves in certain pockets in society as well. So for me, I had to say to myself, okay, you're not just a mum, or you're not just Amy, you can also be this other person. So things that I've struggled with is looking online and seeing lots of really influential women who are, you know, succeeding in life. And I get these little moments where I think, that'll never be me. And I have to work really, really hard at telling myself, you know, you have to be even in denial. Just believe that you will be able to achieve that nobody else is any different to you. They might definitely have maybe other options available to them. They might have more money. They might have access to different things. But ultimately, if you're not prepared to put in the work, you're not going to get there anyway. So that's what I just keep having to tell myself, just to push myself forward with momentum.
And social media can be both fantastic and dangerous at the same time, can't it? So it can be a great source of information, but also horrific for your own self-esteem for anybody, can't it? So
absolutely. I mean, again, I'm a huge champion of women. I love to see women succeed, but I'd be lying if I said that sometimes I find it difficult to turn envy into inspiration. So a lot of the women I follow will say, oh, if you see X living their best life, that's proof that you can also do that. Some days it's really hard to think like that.
Yeah, totally.
One of my favourite things, I saw it the other day. I think it was, I saw it on a link on LinkedIn, but it was to a YouTube short, and it was a lady. She was a celebrity chef, and she went to celebrities' houses, and then she'd go in the morning, she'd cook them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think I might have said this before on a podcast. If I have, I'm sorry. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She always posts like the great bits of it about like chopping really, really quickly and putting it all together, and then this amazing meal is on boards and things at the end of it, all in the fridge. And then she said, but what you haven't seen, and she put this other video on where she was making, I can't remember, I think she was making the dressing or something, and she's squeezing these lemons, and she knocks over the jug that she was squeezing these lemons into, and she must have squeezed about 20 lemons, and she smashed that on the floor, and then she cut her finger, and there was a plaster on her finger, and the whole point is it's not always as it seems, is it? There's a lot of hard pain that goes into the journey.
Absolutely. And it's also a real game of smoke and mirrors, and kind of coming back to your point about how hard it is to balance being a mother and a business owner. Is also, I look on Instagram in the morning and I see the lady I follow that has amazing hair, that has amazing makeup, that has this perfect house, that's cooking the amazing food, and I'm traveling here, there and everywhere. And I feel like the biggest flop of a failure. And then I realized this is each of their individual jobs. Like I've tried to step away from seeing it really as their personal account and just an advertisement for their life. So yeah, her hair looks great because that's her job. Her house might look absolutely dreadful. Or again, her house looks amazing because this is advertising her business. And I think we try and be perfect at so many different areas of our life, and all we're doing is causing ourselves extreme stress instead of just taking a step back and realizing everyone's got dirty dishes in the sink. You can't do it all the time. Nobody's got a full set of jars that have got labels on. We're just all humans, and we're just trying to make it easier for ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Have to.
Definitely. You do.
Absolutely. You'll drive yourself crazy otherwise.
You will. It's time for me to play Mum again, because I have absolutely loved chatting with you, Amy. I always do, but I absolutely loved it today. And I'm going to have to start finishing up now. So obviously you mentioned loads of resources earlier about helping you to learn and things. Is there any books or a book that you've read that has really helped you on your journey that you could share with us?
That's a really good question. So the Albright founders wrote a book called Believe, Build, Become, which I found so useful when I was first starting out. That was a really easy read. Also, my beloved Holly Tucker, who I adore, she's a real champion of women and small businesses. She has written a book called Love What You Do, and she believes in a great mantra, which is if you love what you do and if it's your passion, you'll kind of never work a day in your life. It just becomes your whole embodiment. So I've loved both of those books. I also love listening to podcasts, and I think there's a lot of really informative podcasts out there that people can just obviously get for free, which is amazing. So much free content.
It is. Cool. And unless you had anything else you wanted to ask, Dan, I'll finish up with our...
I'm good. Okay, you know me, I'll keep going. So you're fine.
So our closing question we ask everybody is, so if you wasn't building your Snot Bother business and you could do anything in the world, what would you do?
I would 100% revert back to my original plan, which would be to work within the NHS. I love people. I love healthcare. I'm one of those crazy people that loves the smell of hospitals. I feel really at home there. And I really firmly believe in the power of the NHS and all that it provides. So I definitely would be in the NHS.
Oh, cool. Okay. Oh, we've got a squeaky chair. I don't know if you heard that.
No?
Cool. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining us. It's been so lovely chatting and having you on the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
If you did, please like and subscribe, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So please do leave us a review or drop us a DM on our Instagram @FounderLifePodcast.
See you in the next episode.